Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Sean Patrick Flannery stars as a veteran with PTSD who's called back into action when the Veterans Affairs Hospital is taken over by terrorists in assault on VA-33. Jason Hill, played by Sean Patrick Flannery, a veteran suffering from PTSD, is meeting his wife Jennifer, played by Gina, Holden, at the Veterans Affairs Hospital where she works to pick up their daughter Sarah, played by Sarah Elizabeth Jensen, while he is visiting a group of terrorists led by Weston Capolla's Adrian Rabakov, and including Mark Dacascos' Jackson and Rob Van Dam's Zero take over the hospital, specifically targeting General Welch, played by Gerald Webb, who sent a team that captured Rabakov's brother. Now it is up to Jason to step into action to save his wife, the General, and the hostages. Assault on VA-33 is directed by Christopher Douglas-Olen Ray, son of the legendarily prolific schlock director Fred Olen Ray, and the son is very much following in his father's footsteps. He started out making films for the Asylum, including 2 and 3-Headed Shark Attack, as well as other movies that have shark as part of the title, as well as their female-led Expendables ripoff Mercenaries, before graduating up into Christmas TV movies and low-budget action fare. So with a CV like that, you know exactly which way this film is going to go. Assault on VA-33, or as it was nonsensically retitled in the UK, Assault on Station 33, is one of a spate of recent Die Hard clones. I don't know why, but we've just had a ton of them in the last year or so, and to its credit, it has no shame in being exactly what it is, right down to the fact that the UK DVD cover proudly boasts this as being Die Hard on steroids, which is not only hyperbolic, but also strangely accurate. I mean, I guess this is like Die Hard if it was abusing performance-enhancing substances, and then it kind of shrank in all the wrong areas. The makers of Assault on VA-33 would like you to know they've watched Die Hard plenty of times because their script is virtually a crib sheet of the entire franchise, right down to details like it's set before Christmas, the hospital is partially under construction, and the hero's wife is being held hostage, but even down to infinitesimally small details like the first time that Jason realises that something is amiss is that one of the terrorists is wearing the wrong name badge, a nod to the bit in Will of Vengeance when McClane notices that one of the people in the lift with him is wearing his fellow cop's badge number. The climax of the movie is just a straight up clone of Die Hard 4.0's. They abduct his daughter in a van and take her to an airfield. That's exactly how that movie ends. But there's a reason why, even in this day and age, Die Hard clones still proliferate. It's because Die Hard was such a good movie that it was practically the blueprint for an entire subgenre. It was a formula, and when done effectively, it still works. The problem with Assault on VA-33 is that it's not a good example of that formula. In fact, what it genuinely reminded me of is the kind of movie you'd see on the bottom shelf of Blockbuster in the mid-90s, in the time when you get a dime a dozen Die Hard clones that somehow manage to screw it up by being ugly or talentless. And believe me, I'm not feeling nostalgic for those kind of movies, but Assault on VA-33 is pretty much the modern equivalent of it. If you've ever seen one of those movies, all the flaws of those are here, like the fact that it feels quite empty and barren. You've got really ugly camera work that doesn't disguise the fact that most of the sets are really kind of sparse and don't have anything in them, or there's no real kind of pacing or rhythm to them whatsoever. You look at the artistry of something like Die Hard, and then you look at something like this that was clearly shot very quickly and cheaply, and it looks incredibly utilitarian at the very best. I mean, Assault on VA-33 isn't going to be great by any stretch. What I want it to be was just entertaining trash. It just doesn't deliver on that front. It basically serves as a conveyor belt of stiff, badly edited fight scenes and even stiffer dialogue and acting. The action, which is the sole reason why I'm watching this, is so badly executed. It's clearly had virtually no time to do any kind of choreography, so fight scenes are just the actors kind of blundering into each other, and gunfights are just the actors firing their weapons willy-nilly. And instead of the editing helping out out by making these feel really kind of quick and brutal. Instead, it leaves in lots of noticeable gaps and pauses, so you can really take in how piecemeal all these sequences were shot. In fact, the editing is one of the biggest hindrances of the entire film. The movie has no kind of pacing or rhythm to it at all. Scenes don't flow into each other, they just feel like they land wherever they may. In fact, it takes forever for the movie to actually get going. The first act is filled with flashbacks that are largely unnecessary, and it's almost 45 minutes before the terrorists take over the hospital properly, and that's after about 15 minutes of them getting their guns ready. You've got to build any kind of tension or suspense in this kind of scenario, and of course this movie has absolutely none of that. Although I could have probably told you that the editing was terrible when I said the movie begins with, you guessed it, a flash forward. It starts with the climax of the movie as the opening pre-titles bit, which is totally unnecessary. And also, how long did it take to get to that bit? 85 minutes. You've given away almost the entirety of the movie. Of course you're not going to build any kind of suspense or tension, because I know the hero's going to make it to the end. The whole point of a Die Hard scenario is that we don't know what's going to happen to our hero, and instead the filmmakers immediately tell you right out of the gate, this is how our movie's going to end, which is totally self-defeating. I also feel like the movie underexploits its own premise, because if you're going to make trash, at least revel in being trash. Instead of making a plain old Die Hard knockoff, why not take advantage of the fact that you've set your movie in a VA hospital where most of the hostages are going to be recovering soldiers, and instead of just having one McClane, have a little squadron of McClanes, have them all working together and using tactics against the terrorists. That would have been a bit of a novel spin on this formula, but of course this movie's not even remotely searching for originality. What I will say though, in terms of imitating Bruce Willis, Sean Patrick Flannery of the Boondock Saints is actually not bad here. I think that he's quite well cast as being this kind of gruff but kind of humorous character. I think he's quite credible as a soldier with PTSD. Even though the movie's depiction of it is woeful to say the least, the credits are still rolling when there's a frankly laughable sequence where he starts having flashbacks because someone's using a coffee machine. Really? I think that Flannery isn't very much helped by the material that he's given, because there's a sequence where he's recalling the most traumatic event in his service, and he's talking about how one of his army buddies made him laugh a lot, and the awkward editing makes him look really stilted because he's just laughing uproariously at just kind of little tiny quips. It's really odd and baffling, and there are little moments like that that just undermine him all the way through. And I've seen Flannery in other stuff. I know that he's a decent performer and he's trying here, but the movie does at times work against him quite a lot. I think that if he had a better script and a better filmmaker, he probably could have done something with this kind of role. As it stands here, it feels like a waste of his talents, and in fact Flannery kind of disappears out of the movie at certain points, and admittedly the same is true of Bruce Willis in Die Hard, but here it feels much less motivated, because in Die Hard it was kind of also a disaster movie, so you had a whole bunch of different characters. Instead here, it just feels like he drops out of the movie for about 10 minutes because they only had him for a certain number of days and that was about it. But that doesn't just apply to him, that could apply to virtually the entire cast of the movie. Characters seem to be segregated in their own scenes and subplots but don't actually interact with anyone. A good example of this is Jason's daughter, who spends virtually the entirety of the movie sat in his car waiting for him to come back, but somehow is oblivious to the explosions and police presence around the building. How does she manage to miss a hostage situation going on? And on one level, yes, that is bad writing, but also I was wondering, were they filming this under COVID protocols, and that's why the actors seem to be separated at all costs? But as it turns out, this was filmed in late 2019, so it doesn't have that excuse. Instead, it's the age-old one of, we only have this actor for 1 or 2 days, so shoot their coverage quickly and then wrap the movie around them. And so that's a real waste of what I would argue to be a really good B-movie cast on paper. You look at that and you think that it's going to be an incredible list of action stars. And instead, they do virtually nothing. Mark Dacascos, for example, seems to have shot his scenes virtually entirely separate from the main cast. He plays a sniper who acts as a lookout, and he spends almost his entire screen time looking down a sniper rifle and taking phone calls up until he finally pulls out a machete, walks into the building, and confronts Flannery in a one-on-one fight. And credit where credit's due, that is the closest this film gets to a good action scene. And I would largely put that down to the fact that Flannery and Dacascos are martial artists, so they know how to make something out of virtually nothing. It's not a great fight by any stretch, but it's at least somewhere in the vicinity of decent, and you wish it was just that little bit longer to take advantage of Dacascos. But at least he actually gets an action sequence, which is more than can be said for some people in this movie, like wrestler turned actor, and I use that term very loosely, Rob Van Dam. You don't hire RVD to act, he's terrible at it. You hire him to do martial arts. Unless you're this movie, who apparently did hire him to act because he's the comic relief. He's the terrorist sat in the van acting as lookout. Again, notice a pattern here. One of the big action leads in the movie is playing lookout, a secondary peripheral role that allows him to be cut in and out of the action. The movie shows just how little regard it has for Rob Van Dam's character that his terrorist doesn't actually die at the end of the movie. He just disappears out of existence. The last time we see him, he's coming out of a van brandishing a gun, but we don't actually see him perish in the ensuing gunfight. The movie just forgets about him as it moves into its ending. Like, did they forget to include the shot of Rob Van Dam dying? Did they even film it in the first place? What happened there? But perhaps the biggest waste of all is Michael Jai White. I think that Michael Jai White never really got his due as an action star, and I think that he's got a really charismatic presence. And in this movie, he is lumbered with the worst written role out of any of them, and that is some feat. His police chief is so grossly incompetent that he makes Chief Wiggum look like a good cop. He's so terrible at his job that you actually think that he's working with the bad guys. That's not actually the case. Very early on, he's called up by the FBI and telling that this high-ranking general is going to this VA hospital, so be on high alert, and if there's anything suspicious, investigate it immediately. So when a veteran calls up the police station and says, there's something very weird going on here, he just immediately dismisses Jason's concerns as just post-traumatic stress, as just some sort of delirium. He just condescends to him entirely on the phone, and this doesn't happen once, this happens several times, whilst also some really weird things are happening at the VA hospital, like the fact that the front receptionist has been replaced with someone else, and Jai White's chief is so bad at his job that he's virtually singularly responsible for the terrorist situation being as bad as it ends up getting, and Jai White spends most of the movie sat behind a desk. That's right, martial artist Michael Jai White is plonked behind a desk for most of this movie. Come on! And then, once he finally gets lured out to a mobile command centre, he has to get dragged away by the FBI because he keeps negotiating with the terrorists and giving them exactly what they want. That's not what you're supposed to do in this situation! And that's not meant to be a comedic character, we're meant to take him seriously. And Jai White is trying to do his best here, but the script resolves to make him look like an idiot. He does finally see some action at the climax, getting a little bit of gunplay, but by that point I was just frankly astonished that he was even sharing the same frame as Flannery, because the movie is so episodically put together. There's a sequence where the terrorists shoot down a helicopter that's never remarked on by anybody, and I don't even know how that helicopter got there, because that's before the police are really aware of the situation and are sending anybody there. So Where did the helicopter come from? Why does no one remark on the fact that someone has shot down a helicopter and it exploded past the hospital? Maybe if the movie worked on those details instead of systematically blurring any kind of car badges or license plates, maybe we might have had a better movie. Elsewhere in the villain role we have Weston Cage Coppola. That's right, Nicolas Cage's son. And while the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, because he is absolutely hamming it up here, just gnawing away on the scenery, complete with a not actually half bad Russian accent, he doesn't have the presence of his old man. It's definitely a Jason Connery situation. You can see the family resemblance, but those acting skills haven't really been passed down. He's quite wooden and just not threatening. He can't carry a role like this, and the script tries to compensate by making the terrorists here really quite ruthless for a die-hard knockoff. They kill anyone who doesn't follow their commands, and yet still, they're not all that scary, and I just don't think that Cage Coppola can really support being in a major role like this, and I don't think that he really has the same ability as his father. However, what makes Assault on VA-33 one of the sloppiest die-hard knockoffs I've ever seen is just simply down to the poor quality of the filmmaking. As you'll be no doubt unsurprised here given the director's CV, this is filmed like a TV movie. It feels ready-made to be something that you catch switching channels at 3 o'clock in the morning, and so that means that it's really graciously filmed. The camera isn't so much placed as just plonked. You've got lots of flat, static compositions. There's no attempt to make it look more expensive than it actually is, or hide the faults in their set dressing or their limitations. They're just all out on display with absolutely no regard for just how ugly it looks the entire time. And I can forgive that, but then you've just got incompetence, in my opinion. Like, you've got a subtitle that says couple days before Christmas, not couple of days before Christmas. Did you even read that after you typed it the first time? The climax of the movie, they're at the airfield and it's dusk, and then they get in the hangar and it turns into night in literally a matter of seconds. But perhaps the worst thing of all, and most distracting, is that this movie has chronic issues with overexposure. I have never seen a movie so consistently plagued by this issue. The whole movie is too bright. You can just look at any given shot in this movie and you go, that's a little bit too bright. But then there are certain moments where it's just completely blown out. You've got huge overexposed chunks of shot, especially when characters stand next to windows and things like that. And I've never seen anything like this. I don't even understand how the filmmakers managed to overexpose indoors. There are sequences where characters walk under fluorescent lights and the lights blow out their faces into just a bathing of white. Like, it's ridiculous. How did this happen? How did no one look at the camera and go, yeah, this looks completely exposed wrong? Like, what is the excuse here? Did they forget to bring NDs? Did they bring the wrong lenses? Honestly, there is no excuse for it. This is a professionally shot movie, and the whole film looks like it was done by amateurs. That is what makes this one of the worst Die Hard clones in recent memory. I mean, come on, you learn from making films for the Asylum, but surely they taught you how to expose a shot properly. Come on, film students do better than this. And this was a movie that was released in theatres. This played in actual cinemas in the States. Assault on VA-33 is abysmal, and the fact that so many recognisable action stars are in it is an embarrassment, especially given how thoroughly it squanders their talents. You would at least hope, given their involvement, it would at least be halfway decent on the action front, but this is an awkwardly shot, badly made film that managed to take a tried and tested formula and screw it up in almost unfathomable ways. I mean, I know the bar for movies has gotten a little bit lower during the pandemic, but even so, a movie where 70% of it is overexposed is really taking the mickey. Compared to this, SAS Red Notice looks like the original Die Hard. If you like this review, then you can buy me a Ko-fi, or it's welcome to the party, pal, over at my Patreon, where you can see my reviews early among other perks, including access to my Discord server. But until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.